Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Robertson, and as the more eagle-eyed among you have already spotted, I've just released a new submarine for the game Barotrauma on the Steam Workshop. As it says in the description, as an attack submarine that has been repurposed into a deep diver vessel, the Triton has had most of its weaponry removed, the military-grade nuclear reactor replaced with a significantly weaker, yet more efficient one, and its hull has been reinforced to withstand the crushing pressures of the abyss. Despite being poorly armed initially, the Triton has retained all of its original turret hardpoints, and, as anyone that's willing to invest in it will soon discover, the Triton can still be a formidable vessel. Well, without further ado, let's have a quick tour of the vessel, shall we? I'll try and talk about each of the features it has as I come across them, but as sure as fate, I'll probably miss at least one of them. To begin with, we have the command section here, along with the gunnery compartment just above it. And this is the armory, which has a door that isn't restricted itself, but the buttons that lock it are. This is for when you're playing with bots or players that you can trust. You can just leave them unlocked. There's also an assortment of guns placed in the weapon holders above, along with 2 secure containers for keeping any ammo and equipment that you may need. There's also a brig that features an identical locking mechanism. The brig itself comes complete with table and bunks, ideal for locking away any unruly crewmates or for those prisoner transportation missions. Although I think I've only ever come across one of those so far, so they might be quite rare. Upstairs we have the upper armory, or loading compartment if you prefer, which, as you can see, has been laid out to try and save as much space as possible. So too has the magazine, for storing any extra ammo boxes or railgun shells. I've deliberately put those next to each other in order to make reloading a little faster, or at least that's the theory. Back in the command section we've got the usual nav console, which has quick command buttons to launch both the depth charges and to shut down the reactor in an emergency. You'll also notice that there's 2 buttons here. These are for arming and disarming the primary and secondary gun turrets. The primary ones are those placed in the centre of the sub and are more likely to be railguns. Although you can't hear it, I'm actually pulling the trigger right now, but nothing is happening because I've disarmed the secondary turrets, which includes that coil gun. I've just armed them again, and now, as you can see, I'm able to fire. Which is great for preventing bots or trigger-happy players from wasting expensive ammo or using nuclear shells too close to the sub. And here we have the room where most of the diving suits and oxygen tanks are stored. These are all connected to the power grid, so if you flick this switch it'll refill the oxygen bottles for you, and you can turn it off again to save power. And as expected, these cabinets next to them contain all the usual equipment you'll need when you venture outside the sub. This room is the workshop, which is almost identical to the one from the EK Marauder. In here you can find both the fabricator and deconstructor, both of which are linked to the large metal storage cabinet below, giving you plenty of space for your crafting needs. In here we also have the oxygen generator. It'll stay off until the oxygen levels on the sub drop below a certain level, but it can be switched on manually using this button here, all thanks to the automated system created by Badgerman. This, as you may have guessed, is the junction room, where most of the sub's junction boxes are kept. They are labelled for ease of reference, and there's even some handy fire extinguishers nearby, should any suddenly become damaged and catch on fire. Yes, as we subtly ignore our colleague as they come in to fix things, we find ourselves in the engine room, which has 2 emergency dive suit lockers in case of flooding, a battery used as surge protection for the main engine, and the main engine itself. There's also this status display monitor here, which is actually linked to the nav console in the command room. What I will direct your attention to, however, is this engine and ballast cut-off lever. This has been added for 2 reasons. Firstly, as a means of saving power when the sub is sitting on the ocean floor and you've got people outside, and secondly, and probably most importantly, to cut power to the ballast pumps when you've got a ballast flora infestation. This will stop the flora from taking control over the ship's doors and hatches, making it a lot easier to drain the water from the ballast tanks and eventually kill. As you can see, the ballast tank doors open out into the lower airlock where that small pump will eventually drain the excess water. Therefore it's better to do that either when you're docked at an outpost or lodged against the roof of a cavern somewhere. Well, now, providing my engineer doesn't electrocute himself to death, we can now proceed to the reactor room. This reactor is unique in that it is using an automatic reactor controller made by Ignis. This keeps the reactor running at the bare minimum of power, helping to prevent it from melting down and making the fuel rods last a lot longer. Only the engineer himself is able to adjust these reactor control settings on the screen, as these should only be touched by someone that knows exactly what they're doing. Indeed, the only times these should be changed is when you need to reduce the output and cause an undervoltage to save fuel during quiet spells, or increasing the reactor's maximum power setting after it's been upgraded at an outpost. The only reason why I've been allowed to change them is because I'm the captain. Likewise, only the engineer and mechanic have access to the fuel rod storage container. In my playthroughs, assistants are usually either manning the guns or doing general repairs. Usually things that don't put the rest of the crew at risk. Here we have the med bay, along with a medical fabricator and the linked medicine cabinet. There is also a toxin cabinet nearby which only the medic can use. So if you're worried about anyone stealing the fentanyl, you can just store it in there. Or, if required, you can lock the med bay doors much in the same way as the other ones, except that these also grant access to the medic. As well as that storage area there's also more storage shelves in the central access passageway here, but I only really tend to use those for cargo missions. Up here we have the crew's quarters, along with some more storage cabinets. All of these have been shamelessly copied from the Typhon and edited slightly, but they do give you somewhere to rest and heal minor afflictions during quiet spells. And next door we have the mess room, which serves no purpose at all whatsoever other than for aesthetic reasons. So, if you don't like it, you can just replace it in the Submarine editor with more storage space if you want. And here we have the upper airlock, which also has a couple more diving suit lockers and another cabinet for diving equipment. Unlike other submarines, however, both the airlock door and the upper hatch can be opened and used to exit the sub when needed. Which, as fate would have it, is exactly what I plan to do right now. As I've said on the Steam Workshop, this sub is something that I pretty much built from scratch over the course of a few weeks, based on a combination of all of my favourite features taken from several subs that I've used in a couple of Barotrauma playthroughs already, including the EK Reliant, Typhon, Typhon 2, Humpback, EK Marauder, the Dugong and even the Castrol. As a result, this submarine is something of a Frankenstein's monster of all of my favourite subs, but with my own spin on how I wanted it all laid out and to appear in-game. The reason why I did this was that my main issue with many submarines on the workshop were just how ridiculously overpowered they were, with many having way too much storage space, tons of weaponry from the outset, and capable of outrunning almost anything in the game, which, as you can imagine, made it all a little too easy and took a lot of the challenge out of the game for me. Take this artifact storage bay for example. I borrowed this from the EK Reliant and EK Kira. What I did do is that whilst I kept the water that half fills it to stop the thermal artifact from burning everything, I removed the fabricator because it was toggled as invincible, which I felt was a little bit unfair. At least this way, you can still safely carry the artifact back to an outpost to complete an artifact mission, but if you want to deconstruct it, you'll still have to run the gauntlet of either going through your own sub or the outpost to reach the deconstructor inside. Overall, my intention was to make this as vanilla friendly and as bot friendly as possible. Also worth mentioning is that I've only added 2 coil guns to the sub on purpose, but also remember that it comes with 4 additional turret hardpoints, so the option to add more guns is there if you want it, which means that it should appeal to both the casual gamers and the hardcore neckbeards too. As you've just noticed, this sub comes with an additional sonar screen. This one is a lot smaller than the one on the nav terminal, but it does have a mineral detector. It will drain power when active though, so don't forget to switch it off. Another feature of the sub are the 2 external cameras that you can switch between just by clicking the left mouse button. thanks to a system created by Endy and uploaded onto the Steam Workshop. The Triton also comes with batteries that automatically provide backup power whenever the reactor shuts down or is struggling to cope with the load it's under. This can provide just enough power to the engines and ballast tanks for several minutes, providing you don't go crazy on the helm of course, which should give your crew more than enough time to replace a used fuel rod, or when you need to run silent to try and quietly escape from an abyss monster that you'd rather not fight. Now, I was trying to give you an example of how quickly they drain, but my engineer was just too efficient and has restarted the reactor again. So I've just removed those orders from his queue and I'll try again. Yeah, check that out. It's enough to last a minute or two, but it's not something you should rely on. Although I'm going at full speed, I'll try slowing down a little. If you're trying to hide from an abyss monster like a Charybdis or Endworm, you'll ideally want to have both the reactor off and the engines under 20% in order to stay quiet enough. Yeah, that's a little better, but it's still draining pretty quickly, so it should definitely only be used as a last resort. Before I finish this video, what I would like to do is give a shout out to another content creator that I only just came across a few weeks ago called Ironic and Dead. He has released some utterly incredible Barotrauma content that goes into some amazing detail regarding the various features of the game, including the missions, some of the subs, weapons, and even the medical aspect. So whether you're an existing fan of this game or would just like to learn more about it, then I definitely recommend checking out his channel. As always, I'll provide a link to it in the description below. Anyway, I've just told my engineer to restart the reactor now, so we should see the battery start to recharge again. Perfect. Well, that pretty much covers it for this video. If you like what you saw, then please feel free to grab the Triton from the Steam Workshop via the link in the description below. I sincerely hope you all enjoy using it as much as I did building it, and losing it several times during the campaign. Once again, I would like to thank all of my followers and amazing subscribers out there, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, this is Robertson, signing off.